Welcome to this video, a series of videos on COP26, the biggest climate change conference that will be held in Glasgow, UK, starting November 1st to 12th this year. Africa was one of the regions that is heavily impacted by climate change. We will be taking 54 members to this conference, and on this video we'll be looking at the agenda of Africa. So what does Africa want? What does Africa take to Glasgow COP26? Before we continue, I would kindly request you to subscribe to this channel and also hit the notification bell so that whenever we upload a new video on COP26 or any other topic, you get notified. Also, like, share, and leave a comment. Now I'm back into our topic of the day. Africa is one of the continents that is heavily impacted by climate change. Yet, the continent only contributes to only 4% of the global greenhouse gases emission. This is the lowest for any region, but the effects of climate crisis are heavily felt in this continent. Talk of food insecurity, talk of resource-related conflicts that are everywhere in the continent, in Sudan, in Mali, in Central African Republic, in Democratic Republic of Congo, and many other countries. Talk of water scarcity that is being experienced in different parts of the continent, and many other climate-related effects. They are mainly, or they heavily impact the continent. Yet, we contribute only 4% of the greenhouse gases emission. This makes any efforts that are geared towards addressing climate change very important for Africa. COP26 has said that this is our last chance to tackle climate change and avoid catastrophic events. Africa has to put a very strong case at COP26, and the world ought to listen. The continent needs to speak in one voice. The Africa group of negotiators promised to speak with one strong, clear, and single voice at Glasgow 2021. They maintain that COP26 will succeed only if Africa is at the heart of the negotiations. Africa has unique needs. The negotiators recognize that Africa has unique needs, with COP26 presenting an opportunity for them to be addressed. They recommend the following actions towards recognition and addressing these unique needs. 1. They need the rich countries to avoid shifting their climate responsibility, particularly those regarding the accumulative greenhouse gas emission, to developing countries. They want developed countries to take the lead with the targets for reaching net zero emissions by 2050. They want the developed countries to have very ambitious targets in their NDCs. They want developed countries to mobilize and provide adequate climate finance resources and transfer environmental sound technologies to African countries. Africa wants to get a good share of the amount that is being pledged so that it can be able to adapt and mitigate. And this should not come in forms of loan, should come in forms of grants, because Africa is already too heavily burdened by debt. So adding more debt will even make the situation worse, because most of these resources that they get will go towards refinancing these debts, and nothing will go towards mitigation and adaptation. So Africa wants developed countries to commit and to live by the pledges so that Africa can be able to mitigate and also adapt to the effects of climate change. Also, they're urging the developing world not to use COVID-19 crisis as an excuse to derail the climate finance agenda. So developed countries should not hide behind the COVID-19 crisis to deny Africa what rightfully belongs to them. We contribute only a small portion of greenhouse gases emission, yet we suffer the most, or Africa suffers the most when it comes to the effects of climate change. At COP26, the negotiators, African group of negotiators, say that countries must agree on finance architecture, including an agreement on the continuation of long-term climate finance, which is under the United Nations framework on climate change. This should be an addition to the launch of new finance goal under the Paris Agreement. Another way through which African voice should be heard is developed countries must pledge to meet their pre-2020 climate finance gap. So there is a gap of 100 billion that should be met, and developed countries ought to pledge and live up to their pledges. COP26 negotiators must recognize that conditional parts of national determined contributions (NDC) represent the most ambitious contributions to Paris Agreement on the climate change, and this require climate finance resources that should be accessible through bilateral and multilateral channels. Lastly, Africa needs additional support for its initiative, including African Renewable Energy Initiative and Africa Adaptation Initiative. The continents require grants, not just loans, that make the debt burden heavy. This finance should come in terms of grants so that countries can be able to tackle the climate change, adapt, mitigate, without putting the country into heavy debt burdens. And for Africa to be able to speak in one voice and also convince the other parties that it's urgent, and Africa voice need to be heard, it is very important that this conference be held in person. See, we are living at a period when there are restrictions on movement due to COVID-19, and COP26 will be a huge gathering which will attract 30,000 people. So there is a strong justification as to why this conference should be held in person, despite the condition that we are in. Already we have restrictions around the world where people are required to isolate themselves for a certain period of time, especially when they're coming from countries which are in the red list. UK has put so many countries, and most of these countries are in developing world. They have been put in the red list, such that for them to enter the country, they must isolate themselves for a certain period before they are allowed into the conference. So restrictions that may prevent Africa from presenting its strong voice should be lifted. Those people who are attending these conferences should be given a chance to attend the meeting without being put into some of these strict conditions. So there's the conditions that where people are required to isolate themselves at their own cost. This will only disadvantage those countries which are in the red list, and as you have seen, most of these countries are in Africa and other developing countries, and these are the countries that need to present their case and need to be heard, so that we avoid the catastrophic events that are happening in the continent and other parts of the global south. It's also very important that all countries should be represented. We have started hearing some countries withdrawing from this conference. That's not good, because we need to have everybody in the conference so that we can reach the objectives of this conference, which are to ensure that we get enough funds to adapt, to mitigate, and also collaboration among countries. If at all African voice will not be strong, the world will not listen, we still have another chance. COP27. COP27, given the nature of COPs, is supposed to be held in Africa. Remember, this conference rotates among the regions, and COP27 will be African chance to host this conference. So countries, African countries, should make the COP27, if at all they don't succeed in driving the agenda in COP26, they should make COP27 an African, or truly an African COP, and that climate is part of the priorities in terms of policies and development. So that's the African agenda in COP26, and needs to be strong. Developed countries need to listen and do everything possible to ensure that Africa is enabled to mitigate and also adapt to climate change effects, because the country and also other regions in the global south will suffer, or are already suffering, the consequences of climate change crisis. So come November 1st to November 12th, African voice need to be strong and need to be heard. So thank you for watching this video. We'll be having another video, a continuation in this series of COP26 videos on climate change conference. Thank you and welcome in another video in the future. Thank you.